Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a type of hernia you might not have heard of, but it's one of the most dangerous. It's called a femoral hernia, and, understanding what it is, well, it's pretty critical.
So what is this thing? We're going to break down exactly what this high-risk bulge is, who it affects the most, and why it's a condition that demands, and I mean demands, immediate medical attention.
All right, first things first. Let's get a really clear, simple idea of what we're actually talking about here. Okay, so what's happening here is that tissue from inside the abdomen, we're often talking about part of the intestine, finds a little weak spot, and it pushes through this narrow channel in the upper thigh. That specific path, through what's called the femoral canal, is exactly what makes it a femoral hernia.
And here's something that's really important to know. While it's the third most common type of these hernias, you're never born with it. This is an acquired condition, something that develops over your lifetime because of certain pressures or weaknesses in your body.
So that begs the question, right? If it's acquired, who is most likely to get one? Well, it turns out the demographics are pretty surprising.
Look at these numbers. It is 4 times more common in women than in men. 4 to 1. So what's going on here? Why this huge gender gap? The answer is actually tied to one of the biggest events in a person's life.
And there it is, childbirth. The condition is way more common in women who've had multiple kids. It's thought that the stretching of all those pelvic ligaments during pregnancy and delivery creates the weakness. And this connection totally explains why it's so rare in men, in children, and in women who haven't given birth.
So how do doctors tell them apart? It really comes down to location, location, location. A femoral hernia shows up below the groin crease. The much more common inguinal hernia, that's above it. But here's the twist. Even though femoral hernias hit women so much harder, the single most common type of hernia in women overall is still the inguinal hernia. Kind of wild, right?
Okay, now we need to talk about the real reason this specific hernia is taken so seriously. There's one major, life-threatening complication that doctors are always on the lookout for, and that's strangulation.
The risk is just so high because the opening it pushes through, that femoral ring, is a really narrow, rigid, and unforgiving space. Think of it like a bottleneck. It is incredibly easy for that tissue to get trapped, and when it does, its blood supply gets completely cut off. That's strangulation, and it's always, always a surgical emergency. This statistic is just staggering. For 40% of people who get a femoral hernia, the very first sign that anything is wrong is when they are in the middle of a life-threatening emergency. Think about that. This is not a condition that gives you a gentle warning. It just shows up, and it's serious.
This quote really says it all. Because that risk of strangulation is so incredibly high, the medical world is in total agreement here. There is no watchful waiting. Once a femoral hernia is diagnosed, surgery isn't just an option, it's what has to happen next. And it has to happen fast.
All right, so if surgery is the only real answer, what does that actually look like? Well, the goals of the repair are actually very straightforward. It really boils down to 2 main jobs for the surgeon. First, they have to gently guide that tissue that's poking through the hernia sac back where it belongs. And second, they have to close up that hole in the femoral canal so it can never, ever happen again.
Now, surgeons have a few different ways to get this done, and each one is suited for a different situation. For a standard non-emergency case, they might use something called the Henry approach. If a patient has both a femoral and an inguinal hernia, a McVeigh repair can tackle both at once. But for those really critical strangulation emergencies, a surgeon might use the McKevity approach. It gives them the best possible access to deal with that life-threatening situation.
So, if you remember one thing from all of this, let it be this. A femoral hernia is a high-stakes condition. It might be less common than other hernias, but its potential to cause a major problem is so high that getting surgery right away isn't just a suggestion, it's the absolute rule.